28th, SmokyHillMuseum.org.
Okay. It is 4 o'clock, September 16th. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The mayor had to step out. She was getting a little sick. Winter's not even here yet, and people are already starting to get a cold. So we'll have the call to order, and I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mayor Shirley. Vice Mayor Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Hardy.
Here. At this point, those of you who are able, if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Go to awards and proclamations, of which we have none. We'll now open up to the Citizens Forum. This is a time when the citizens can come before the Commission with any items of interest to them that is not on today's agenda. If they want to address us, now would be that time. Is there anyone here from the public? Seeing no one, I'll move us on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time, which we have none, and move us on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of September 9th, 2013. Item 6.2, granting a utility easement to Kansas Gas Service at the East Crawford Recreation Area. Item 6.3, acceptance of public drainage easement dedication on Lot 1, Block 1 in the Premier Edition. Item 6.4, authorize the purchase of 2 chlorine feeders at the water treatment plant from Hydro Instruments in the amount of $14,750.
Is there any item that a commissioner would like to remove or amend from the consent agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes 4-0. Moving on to development business.
Item 7.1, acceptance of the dedication and additional right-of-way for Crawford Street and adopt resolution number 137041, authorizing license agreements for the placement and maintenance of landscaping in the Crawford Street right-of-way and placement of a loading-unloading space in the Prescott Avenue right-of-way.
Mr. Andrew on this, I believe.
Vice Mayor, Commissioners, we have multiple items here, but they're contained in one report because all the pieces fit together and they are all related to one another. So I'll kind of walk you through from the start. We have Mr. Jim Collier here with Vermeer Development. He is the lead developer for CVS Pharmacy, so he can answer specific questions related to the project. But essentially, they have a contract to purchase the northeast corner of Ohio Street and Crawford Street, and their plan is to complete the purchase, clear the site, and construct a new 13,225 square foot pharmacy. There are 3 current record owners of the property. The Smolich Trust, John, you'll have to go, they own this property here, which is Continental Hair Care. As you are aware, they are relocating to the corner of Greeley and Ohio and the former Jeff Wells Insurance Agency. You saw that case a few weeks back. This is a convenience store that is owned by the Ralph J. Bennett Trust, and then this is a display lot for Bennett Autoplex that is owned by the Carolyn J. Bennett Trust. In discussions with staff and the city's development review team, due to the existing conditions at the Ohio-Crawford intersection and also the potential for increased traffic associated with this project, we determined there could be a possible need for an additional left turn lane at Crawford or some other geometric improvements to the intersection. One of the limitations there is that there's only 30 feet of right-of-way for the north half of Crawford. Our standard for an arterial street is 50 feet from center line, which we have on all the legs of Ohio but do not have on Crawford. So CVS Pharmacy has agreed to dedicate 20 feet of additional right-of-way here along the south edge of their property holdings, essentially that area that you see shaded there. That would increase the right-of-way width from 30 feet to the standard of 50 feet. And because this dedication is being offered before they are closing and taking ownership and possession of the property, all the documents that you see associated with this are with the current record owners of the property, which would be the George A. Smolich Living Trust and the Ralph J. Bennett Trust. So this dedication is voluntary in nature, but it consists of an area that would normally be part of the front yard landscape area for a new commercial project. And since we don't have any immediate plans to widen or do anything with Crawford, the plan is for CVS to go ahead and dedicate the right-of-way, but also to go ahead and landscape this area and treat it and take care of it as if it's their own, even though the city would actually have title to it. And this has occurred in some other locations in front of the Petro 2 convenience store on North 9th, also at the now Casey's, formerly Green Lantern at Magnolia and 9th Street. That nice green area at the southwest corner is owned by the city, but it is maintained by Green Lantern under a similar license agreement. Well, now it's maintained by Casey's, but essentially they were allowed to utilize the right-of-way as part of their front yard landscaping if they agreed to maintain it. And so that is what is being proposed here as far as, so what we'd be looking at is that they would have a strip of landscaping here that's on their own property. There would be a public sidewalk constructed here well away from the traveled way, and then this area out here would be landscaped as well and would be taken care of by CVS Pharmacy until there was a time where there was improvements made to Crawford Street. Associated that, this lot is presently 264 feet deep north to south. They would be losing 20 feet off of that and 4,000 square feet of usable area. And so because of that, they're proposing as part of their plan to locate their truck delivery, loading, unloading space to the right-of-way area along Prescott, this shaded area right here. So Prescott has 60 feet of right-of-way. There's 33 feet of paving width. They would be using the area between the south curb line and the south property line as a unloading zone. The rolled curb on Prescott would remain in place. They are proposing to construct a loading space that would be about 113 feet long and 10 feet wide. It would be surfaced with stamped colored concrete to distinguish it from the street. The loading space would start east of a driveway entrance here off of Prescott and would extend over to near LaFran. So as we pointed out, the right-of-way is a form of ownership of land by the city for the benefit of the public, and the area dedicated for right-of-way is used for streets, sidewalks, transmission of utilities, storm drainage, and it is distinguishable from the outright ownership of land by the city, because if the use by the city as right-of-way is ever abandoned, there are reversionary rights for the abutting owners. We pointed out that the city has from time to time done license agreements for a variety of things. There's a license agreement for Sculpture Tour Salina to have those sculptures located within the public right-of-way. We have places where we have some physical encroachments, like a portion of the ADM truck scale facility on East Ash. A small portion of that extends into the Ash right-of-way. We have a number of agreements with Salina Regional Health Center where they have permission to run fiber optic cable within the public right-of-way or across a public right-of-way. So as we look at what is the potential fiscal impact to the city, they would be dedicating 20 feet of right-of-way to the city of Salina at no cost. They would be responsible for the initial planting and ongoing maintenance and replacement costs for that landscape area. They would be responsible for any irrigation installed and the cost of supplying water to that area, and they would be responsible for the initial discussion or the construction and then the ongoing maintenance of the truck loading zone. So it's our belief that this type of cooperative agreement for an integrated landscape plan for the CVS pharmacy is consistent with the cooperative landscaping done at 9th and Magnolia and other locations. And I think you would agree that across the street at McDonald's, there's an area there where between the sidewalk and curb is actually city right-of-way, but it's well taken care of by McDonald's, and even though it's owned by the city, it looks like it's part of that site. So it's our belief that this type of partnership would be helpful in that regard. I did want to share that there were a number of revisions and exchanges, but that this plan, because of the 4 front yards, is slightly less than the required green space by our formula. Part of that is because they can't take credit for that because they're giving it to are proposing to give it to the city of Salina, but in terms of the number and types of plantings and the plant material, their plan meets or exceeds all the city's landscaping requirements. Their site plan, as submitted, meets all zoning requirements for the C5 district. And so the options that we have laid out for you today is that you could approve the 2 license agreements, one for the cooperative landscaping in the right-of-way and one for the placement of the loading space. You could postpone consideration of the request if you feel additional information is needed to reach a decision, or you could decline to approve the proposed license agreements and give further direction to CVS Pharmacy and to staff as to what you'd like to see occur. If you select option 1, then you should, by separate motion, authorize the mayor to accept the offered right-of-way dedications. So essentially, as this is structured, these are items that the sellers are contractually obligated to execute, and then once all of these things are in place, the plan is that CVS would move forward with closing on and purchasing the property. But the reason it's structured with the current owners is because they have not yet taken title and possession of the property. So I'd be happy to address any questions you have. Aaron Martin is here from the city attorney's office, and he was instrumental in preparing these documents. He would be available for questions, or any other member of city staff. And again, Mr. Collier, representing CVS Pharmacy, is here if you have. I will add that some of you may recall we had a public meeting at the school district offices, and part of that was floating the idea of possible closures or modifications to Prescott and LaFran, and those have been taken off the table, and the plan that you see today makes no modifications to the surrounding street system and fits entirely within the 200-foot by 264-foot area, minus the loading space, which is essentially losing on the south and utilizing additional space on the north. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
Sure. Would the right-of-way dedication then be a permanent dedication to no matter who is on that
Once
land?
it is signed, accepted by the mayor on behalf of the city, and recorded, title would pass to the city as right-of-way. And so then this, once that's recorded, this strip is owned by the city of Salina. It's under our control. The license agreement is basically in place until we have a different need for the right-of-way, and then we can inform them that says we think we need the right-of-way for street improvements, in which case this landscape area would be at least partially removed and additional street improvements would go in there. But that would occur if you authorize the mayor to accept the dedications, that title would pass to the city immediately.
I did attend that informational meeting at the USD 305 building, and I was happy to see that some of the concerns of the citizens were taken into account by the CVS representative and were incorporated in the final plans, and I applaud the CVS for that.
Yes, I think through our discussions and dialogue that we have beefed up the landscaping and some of the things. John, I didn't know if you got to the elevation drawings. These are not really part of the action today, but just for your benefit, these are the elevations of the proposed building. So this is the face that would face Crawford Street. This is the face that would face Ohio Street. This is the face that would face LaFran, but we have, I think, beefed up the landscaping along there that will provide buffering along there, so that's not what would be seen. And then this is the north face of the building, which would face the loading dock, but would also face Bennett's dealership across the street, and that has the least amount of screening and buffering on it.
Is the loading dock strictly a loading dock only, and a non-parking area any other time?
It will be posted accordingly, but it would be for the unloading and loading of vehicles, and we would work with them to get appropriate signage. It's not for customer parking or for people to run in and pick up a prescription. It's strictly for the unloading and loading of vehicles that would come to deliver produce to the store.
And it looks like it's adequate so that the people that drive back there to get to the neighborhood aren't going to be impeded
Right.
at all.
The curb it's a roll curb there, and that will stay exactly as is, so the trucks would drive over the roll curb and then do their loading and unloading, but they would be off of the street and would not interfere with the traveled way. Even today, we have some occasions where the trucks delivering new vehicles or used vehicles will sometimes park and unload in the street, but this would get the delivery vehicles off of the traveled way.
I like the plan with the extra space in the front because it allows you to have the sidewalk there. And if I'm correct, there's no sidewalk on the south side of
That is correct.
that street.
There's no
So-
sidewalk on the south side, and the sidewalk that's there at Crawford today sits right behind the curb and is not really very pedestrian friendly. So this would move it away and make it more pedestrian friendly by having a buffer.
Right. Very good. And I'll just also agree with Commissioner Hardy. I think there was probably 20 to 30 people at the community meeting that all had input. It does look like everything was addressed there adequately. If nothing else, there's not a whole lot of people here opposed to it, so I think that says a lot too. So looks like staff and the developer were able to come to
I
mutual.
think it took some creative
benefit.
work, but we were able to get everything refitted to entirely on the site.
Yeah, it looks good.
Were you able to squeeze all the required parking spaces in as well?
Yes, it actually has a slight excess of parking above our minimums. So the parking would primarily be on the west and south sides, and then you would have a drive-through pharmacy pickup here that would circulate there. But obviously, today we have a convenience store that has driveways on Ohio Street and on Crawford, and under this plan, those would all go away.
Right.
And
Looks
I
like a
guess-
really good plan to me.
Yeah, and I don't want to assume that there has been no public comment that you have received, but have you not received any?
We have not received any follow-up, and the only agreement that we had with the neighborhood was that if we were still pursuing modifications to the street, that we would reschedule and reinvite them to that, and then once the street modifications came off the table, we were basically in an administrative review and building permit mode, except for their need for these two license agreements, which require your approval. I said, if you have any questions of Mr. Collier about CVS or their particular operation, he can certainly address
My only
those.
thoughts on this, just the landscaping, I just know we've had some accidents with pedestrians at Crawford and Ohio there, and it's really, and I understand our need for landscaping, I just wonder about those two front trees, and it's probably nitpicking, I don't know that this is a final landscape plan. It just seems like we've had some late left turn hits there at that corner where, and I just worry about sight lines, even though our preempters are supposed to turn the lights red when emergency vehicles go through there, sometimes they don't. I just get a little concerned about those two big trees on the corner of Crawford and Ohio cutting back some of the visual sight lines of that corner. Is there any opportunity to maybe modify that?
Well,
or take
there's about 20 feet.
Are they set back pretty good? Okay.
The curb line here is 20 feet. These trees will be set back about 25 feet
Okay,
from the traveled
okay.
way, and on a signalized intersection, your vision triangle is going to come right through here. So even though they appear close, these trees are
Pretty-
27 feet back, and these are probably on the order of 27 feet
Okay, good. I
back.
just-
So we did look for that, but they are not really bunched up right at the
No, and
intersection.
I saw they were pretty spaced out. I couldn't quite tell how close they were, and I knew that was a little bit of an issue. And I knew, as those trees near McDonald's get a little bigger, these get a little bigger. I know that's probably I think it's our highest traffic count intersection, isn't it? Real close. It's one of them. If it's not the number one, it's one or two. So, but it sounds like that's been taken into consideration along with everything else. Any other questions? Oh,
These
sorry.
letters just refer to these as sub-areas, and the only area that's subject to the license agreement is Area D.
Okay.
And so the rest of this will all be on private property, but this is the part that is the cooperative landscaping on Crawford.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dean. Maybe the applicant would like to, if he has anything for us in addition, or?
I just want to let you know that CVS's attorney staff has reviewed the license agreements, and they are in agreement with them. Hope you vote for it, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Any questions?
Nope.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public on this issue? Oh.
Tracy Sin, 340 and a half, South Connecticut. It is an honorable thing to have CVS Pharmacy into the city of Salina. I'm from California, so I'm familiar with that. And I was just wondering how soon they can get this up and going to add more jobs into the city of Salina and making more money for the city of Salina. This is a great, great opportunity to have CVS Pharmacy as a partner in the city of Salina. It's just perfect. I just couldn't imagine any other company, because they do have very good reputation. I've looked into their portfolio, profile, into their finances, and they're one of those successful company.
Good. We can maybe ask him any idea when construction and...
When will it be done, and how many people will you be having as an employments and all this thing going? Because Mercoria, I thank you so much for having them here.
Well, the construction should be done probably the end of the first quarter of 14, and store will open immediately. As far as employment goes, there's I think they start off with 16 employees for starts, and then as the store develops and advances, they bring it in. Of course, there's 2 full-time pharmacists for each store, and then a couple tech assistants that is also full-time employees, plus managers and shift managers. And then most of the sales staff is part-time.
Okay.
So it could grow to 25.
Oh, great, thank you. Appreciate it. Public, I saw we had...
Dennis from the Salina Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to thank your staff for exhibiting that yes somehow attitude and working through this. And as you know, there were some complications, and they worked with the developer and with everybody involved, and just want to publicly make sure we thank the city staff for their work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Dean always does a great job.
One of the best.
He's methodical. Anyone else from the public on this one? If not, I'd bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I would move that we accept the dedication of additional right-of-way for Crawford Street, and I guess that's the first motion.
Second.
A motion and a second to accept the...
Yeah, just a clarification.
sorry.
Just a clarification on your motion. Are you doing the second one first?
Doing the first part of the sentence first.
Do we need a separate motion for authorizing the license agreements first, or?
Yeah, actually, I think the way that the staff report is worded, it lets you make the decision on the license agreement, and then if you are inclined to approve the license agreements, we need to accept the right-of-way. But
Okay.
from a
Okay, change
logical
order.
progression, you might want to do the right-of-way first.
I would move then that we adopt resolution number 13-7041, authorizing license agreements for the placement and maintenance of landscaping in the Crawford Street right-of-way and the placement of loading, unloading space in the Prescott Avenue right-of-way.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt and approve Resolution 13-7041. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 4-0.
All right, then I would move that we accept the dedication of additional right-of-way for Crawford Street.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to accept the right-of-way easement from East Crawford Avenue. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That also carries 4-0. Moves us on to 8.2, is that, or sorry, 8.1, I'm sorry.
Item 8.1, second reading ordinance number 08-10455, vacated platted restricted access in 2 locations along the east side of Lot 1, Block 1 of the Lakewood School Addition.
Mr. Andrew again. Going to get a workout today. Well, I guess it's your last one.
For a while.
For a while, yeah.
I guess this had come up under old business, but this was kind of a housekeeping item left over from an application or petition that was initially filed by USD 305. And what it was about was right here we have a circular bus drop-off area. And back at the time of the bond elections and at the time of the platting and layout of this property, it was stated and documented that there would be no vehicular access from the Lakewood Park Drive roadway to the Lakewood Middle School, and that there would be fencing all along this east boundary. There was traffic study done as part of the conditional use permit for the school, and layouts and arrows, but when the school first opened in August 2002, there was quite a bit of gridlock that occurred with buses and parents' vehicles arriving at all the internal drop-off points. And city staff was asked to provide assistance that first week that the school opened. And what was devised was a plan to separate buses and parental drop-off. So the city crews went out and constructed this asphalt ring road there to separate an area for buses to unload and load outside the main traffic circulation. It was recognized that there was restricted access in that location, but it was considered an emergency situation and possibly just a temporary or interim solution. But after 6 years, it became pretty apparent that it was not going to be an interim or temporary solution. So staff was working with USD 305 on a Safe Routes to School project over at Lakewood School, and staff noted that those had taken on a degree of permanency, and what was needed was a petition to formally request the City Commission to lift the restricted access in those locations. While they were looking at the Safe Routes to School project and other items, the school district added to their petition a request for a third location, and that was essentially a driveway that would be located about right here that would be a full access circulation, making it part of the school site's circulation plan. The City Commission conducted a public hearing on the request for the 3 access breaks, and they voted to approve the vacation of restricted access to ratify these 2 locations here, but they voted to deny the request for a full driveway connection to Lakewood Park in that other location. However, they gave some direction to staff to continue to meet with representatives of the school district to possibly explore other options or possibly consider having a updated traffic study that might support or justify that request, or possibly even look at signalization of the Lakewood Park Drive Iron intersection. There were several follow-up meetings between city staff and school district representatives, but the school district has indicated that they consider the matter dropped and they don't wish to pursue any more traffic studies or pursue the Lakewood Park Drive any further at this time. So the ordinance that was drafted for first reading and approved on first reading has been modified, and it's been modified to reflect that these 2 locations, John, if you could go back to that exhibit. Essentially what you have is you have platted restricted access along this whole east boundary, and the ordinance that's before you today would vacate the restricted access here and here, making those openings permanent, and that would complete the process of opening that restricted access at that location, but not in any other location at this time. So what would occur is that if you approve this on second reading today, this ordinance would be recorded in the deeds office, essentially would serve as an amendment to the Lakewood School Plat. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any questions for staff on this?
Is there any, are they supposed to observe any restrictions on parking on the shoulder off of, when I go out, drive down there, oftentimes I'll drive by and I'll see them parked on the grass shoulder.
You're referring to Lakewood Park Drive?
The buses, yeah.
On this,
right up there.
while they're waiting there?
Yeah.
That is not a public street. It's actually a park road, and I guess we'd have to either defer to the Public Works Department or the Parks and Recreation Department on that question, whether they have concerns about that. This is not, if there's multiple buses, this is not a real large area, so they do have to wait and take their turn. But their stacking space is essentially this location here.
So that semicircle is on USD 305
It's on
property?
their property.
Okay, so
And
there's
so if you want to go back to the exhibit, John. So this hashed line right here, that is the property line that divides the park from the school site. And so the roadway here is a park road within Lakewood Park, and then at this point, everything there is owned by the school district.
Okay. So these accesses, you said 7 years? They've been,
Yeah, they were put in an emergency basis in 2002, and then they've now been there in use for 11 years, and seem to have improved the, we have not had to do any redesigning of the circulation on the main school site, and things seem to be flowing pretty well. The original plan was that this road here is still used quite a bit, but that was to be the main circulation to get back to Ohio Street, so that you had a signalized intersection to come out on. Thank you.
thanks.
Any comments from the public on this at all? Nope. Seeing
You know,
none.
that's got to be about the worst site planning I've seen in a long time. I mean, that circulation in that school and the fact that you have a bus drop-off that you didn't plan for
Yeah,
seems a bit
a little
odd.
hodgepodge there.
But anyways, it seems like it's long overdue to make that official, so
Yeah.
anyway.
Any other thoughts, comments? I'd entertain a motion on this action.
I move we approve on second reading. Is this second reading? Approve on second reading ordinance number 0810-455, vacating platted restricted access in the two locations along the east side of Lot 1, Block 1 of the Lakewood School Addition.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 08-10455, vacating platted restricted access in the two locations along the east side of Lot 1, Block 1 of the Lakewood School Addition. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That-
Second reading.
I'm sorry, that's right, second reading. You're throwing, when was the first reading,
Yeah.
2008 on this? There's a little bit of a time delay.
Yeah, we'll give you this one.
Yeah, that's right, sorry, my mistake. This is a second reading,
Commissioner
even
Blan-
though 2 commissions ago were the first readings ago, so.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Householder.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Thanks for pointing that out. I think we were all a little confused on that one. Moving on to at 8.2.
Item 8.2, first reading ordinance number 1010715, amending sections 8-175 and 8-189 of Chapter 8, Article 3, Divisions 2 and 3 of the Salina Code pertaining to continuing education requirements.
Just like Elvin.
Good afternoon, Mayor Householder, Vice Mayor Householder,
There you go.
Commissioners.
Not quite ready for that yet.
Not quite
And
ready for
obviously,
that. Well,
I'm not quite up to speed to be that yet.
get prepared, it comes fast.
Yeah.
This is an ordinance pertaining to the contractor continuing education requirements. One of the first things that came to my attention when I took over the position as building official in 2011 was the contractor education requirements being met. The main problem that I had heard from the contractors was there was not enough contractor code education. So since that time, I have instigated or started where the city teaches. We actually put on 3 classes a year. One is a 3-hour code class for building, a 3-hour code class for mechanical, and a 3-hour code class for plumbing, which I'd like to take a chance to plug. The November 2nd class for plumbing and mechanical is a Saturday. We have Daryl Boger coming up. He's the retired building official for the city of Park City, and he teaches plumbing and mechanical. So he will be teaching that class. That was the one of the problems that we had. The other problem that we had, or wasn't really a problem, but a situation, was that some of the previous staff and myself, we have allowed, the ordinance currently states that the classes need to be related to the building trades. That's pretty vague, pretty wide open. Some of my predecessors allowed safety classes, OSHA classes, which are pertinent to the building trades, but it's even gotten taken further to first aid and CPR. And while those classes are good, they are related to the building trades somewhat. So this is an ordinance that staff has taken to the Building Advisory Board. We did take it back to the Building Advisory Board last year, and we were. That's why the date is May 8th of 2012. That is not a typo. Since then, we've had 2 subcommittees that have formed and met, trying to address qualified individuals, master tradesmen, and the reason we didn't bring this to the commission is because we didn't know whether or not this ordinance would be revised or changed, but it did not through those subcommittees, and we are at this point today bringing this ordinance in front of you. Basically, this is falling in line with this. The state already requires master trade. First of all, there's a distinction between a qualified individual and a master tradesperson, master or a journeyman tradesperson. The state requirements state that not less than 6 hours biannually or 3 hours annually shall consist of code education. Our contracting cycle, contractor licensing cycle, is actually 3 years. So that's why we require the 18, which is 6, 6, and 6. So what we are proposing is to fall in line with the state requirements to not only codify that for the master tradesmen and journey tradesmen, but also to require that for general contractors, A, B, C contractors. We feel that we want to make sure that they are getting at least half of their education, their continuing education, is directly code related. In other words, international building codes, uniform building codes, uniform plumbing mechanical, or international plumbing and mechanical, the National Electric Code, NEC, also the 2010 ADA, any of those adopted codes that we have. I've used this example over and over again. I hate to use it again, but I actually had an electrician want to renew his electrical license with 24 hours of CPR training. And that the state says it has to, half of it has to be code related. So basically that's what we're doing, is trying to codify that language and also to apply that to our A, B, and C contractors. Most of the contractors I've talked to are in favor of this, and since we have now initiated, when I first came here, we had 2 building classes a year, 2 3-hour classes, and they were generally just building code, and that was the main thing that I'd heard, is plumbing, mechanical, electrical didn't have opportunities for, a lot of opportunities for doing that. So that's why the city, through cooperation with the Salina Area Technical College, they put on our electrical classes, and then I have Mr. Boger come up and do the plumbing and mechanical, and my staff and myself usually put on the building classes. So basically we are wanting to add just the language that I believe is in red in your blue sheets. I don't know if it's in red and blue. Anyway, and just basically that language is, in addition to the foregoing requirements, a qualified individual must obtain not less than 3 hours annually of code education. That would be put into the 8-175, and then also the similar language in the master tradesperson, master journeyman, and master tradesperson. In addition to the foregoing requirements, a master or journeyman must obtain not less than 3 hours annually of code education in the work discipline for which the master or journeyman is licensed. And one note, that strike through there is just a cleanup item from the old reciprocal license that we had, and that is what that strike through, that 12 hours, a cleanup from the provisional licensing. So we would ask that Commission, we've provided 3 options. Number 1 would be pass ordinance number 13-10715 on first reading, amending sections 8-175 and 8-189 of Chapter 8, Article 3, Divisions 2 and 3 of the Salina Code pertaining to continuing education requirements. Number 2, pass ordinance number 13-10715, and I think the 8 is a misprint, on the first reading with modifications. Or number 3, postpone any action on the text amendment at this meeting pending further discussion or required action by staff as specified by City Commission. Staff recommends option number 1. And one thing I might add is that, as with all of our contractor and building code regulation or amendments ordinances that we amend, we would ask for a 90-day period for this. And the reason we've gotten this in here today is because The majority of our contractors renew this year, December 31st. So this would actually go in effect starting the next major licensing cycle. Be happy to answer any questions. And
Any questions for staff?
Is this education required of a certain class of contractor? Does it cover most of the contractors that work in the city, like home builders and all that, or?
yes, A, B, and C contractors. An A or a B contractor are mainly your commercial contractors. The C contractors are the residential contractors. And then your master tradesmen, each electrical, plumbing, mechanical company requires a master tradesperson to be on their staff. And also there's a lot of companies, and journeymen, the journeymen plumbers, mechanics, they would require this code education also.
So this would be training that would be desirable by the building trades regardless
Yes.
of whether it was mandatory or not.
Right.
So for instance, if someone wants to get a building permit, is that license requirement in place before the permit is issued, or is that a separate
Yes,
transaction?
we require the contractor to be licensed before we issue the permit. We do on occasion. We had one today actually that will go out the door that the general contractor is licensed and is mechanical and electrical contractor in the process of getting their licenses. So we will sometimes issue a permit with the restriction that they cannot do any of that work until their contractors get licensed. But yes, this is a requirement, except for homeowners are exempt from a contractor requirement. They can do their own work if you are the primary resident if it's your home that you are living in. Yes.
What's the cost of these continuing education courses that the city provides?
As per city ordinance, we charge $25 per hour. So a typical 3-hour course is $75. We do hold our classes that we teach. The one that we're having November 2nd for plumbing and mechanical contractors. Plug that one again, which happens to be on my birthday. That's how dedicated city employee I am.
Hey, fellow Square.
Anyway,
I won't be celebrating my birthday there at that meeting, though. Yeah.
we do use the space that the chamber has a meeting room over there that works perfect for us. We've used that now for a number of years. Of course, like I said, the electrical courses that the Salina Area Technical College puts on are about the same price. I think we figured it out, and it might be just a hair more than that, but it's still very reasonable for contractor education. There's also online courses that I've approved. That's one of the major things that I do, especially right now with the new renewals coming up, is I evaluate a lot of these courses, and I get things sent to me. I even had a contractor that's going to a trade show in Chicago, and he submitted, and of course now with the internet and everything, you can look those up and see what the classes are, and you can approve. I can approve, because everything needs to be promulgated. I hope I got that word right. Promulgated by the building official, which means I pretty much oversee any of those classes and everything. But another thing about this ordinance is it will make it all the same. Because right now we have a problem of any time they call the city clerk's office or our permit techs, it's always very confusing as to who needs what, what are you, this way it's the same across the board. It's 3 hours. It's just like, and I tell the contractors and everybody, it's just like when you were going to college. You have elective classes and you have your required classes. 3 hours are required, 3 hours elective. As long as they're somewhat related to building trades, I'm still gonna allow the first aids, the CPRs, the OSHA training. They have good courses out there at Salina Area Technical College on trenching, excavating to support the shore up the trenching to help prevent collapse. And those are some good classes, and they are building trade related. The safety and the first aid and the CPR are good too. I do feel that they are good, but I don't think that if you do all of your classes in safety and OSHA and CPR, I still want people to get some code because the codes change every year. We have a number of code books that, every time we change codes. And that's another thing I'll mention is that no matter what year it is of training, I will accept it because, we are behind the curve a little bit on the codes, being that they're 2012. They're working on the 2015 codes now, which we're kind of waiting on the State Fire Marshal's office. As soon as the State Fire Marshal's office goes forward with that, then we will move forward also with our code adoption. But I accept any codes, any year of codes, because a lot of the courses are being taught at those newer codes. So I don't require it to be the year of our code because it's just about impossible to find any courses like that.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Elvin. Any games coming up?
Yes, sir. It's the Raiders this next weekend.
Getting to be that season?
I'm sorry?
Getting to be that season?
Yes, it is.
Any public comment on this issue? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve ordinance number 13-10715 on first reading, amending sections 8-175 and section 8-189 of Chapter 8, Article 3, Divisions 2 and 3 of the Salina Code pertaining to continuing education requirements.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on first reading of ordinance number 13-10715, amending sections 8-175 and 8-189 of Chapter 8, Article 3, Division 2 and 3 of the Salina Code pertaining to continuing education requirements. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries 4-0. Moving on to 8.3.
Item 8.3, resolution number 137038, authorizing an agreement with Union Pacific Railroad to perform at-grade public road crossing improvements on East Iron Street.
Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and Commissioners. This is kind of our annual program to perform at-grade railroad crossing improvements around the city. We have about over 70, counted about 74. It seems like some of them are in flux, whether they're being removed in some of the old lines, but at the bottom we have over 70. Most of them are in decent shape. We did talk about definitely Santa Fe, North Santa Fe being one that's next on the list, as well as there's Republic and Claflin that are both coming up on our schedule as well. But Iron is one that has the old rubber panels, which they didn't do very many that way, but the rubber panels have maybe about a third of them have been replaced in that area with just asphalt because they didn't stay down, they didn't work very well. So part of that crossing's actually been just kind of had to been asphalt patches to keep it together, and then the other rubber crossings are really rattling quite a bit, and the bolts have come loose, and we just need to get it on their UP's radar. These take a long time to get through the Union Pacific Railroad. We requested this over a year ago, and then typically it takes sometimes a year for them to actually do the work. So it's something that we have to feel like is 2013. It's in our budget. It is one of our bigger crossings downtown. It's a pretty wide road. It's at least 4 lanes. So it's one of our bigger crossings, and thus it's more expensive than like State Street, South Street, Walnut Street. We did those the last few years, and they're about half this cost. They're just smaller roads. We basically pay UP to relay the sections. They pull the tracks up, they install the concrete panels, they level them, they put in the ballasts, which is the rock beneath the panels, and the cross ties, and then other track and whatever is necessary to complete the project. The city crews, our city public works street personnel come in and do the tie-in work to the tracks once the panels are put in. So we usually have to do either asphalt or concrete, or most of the time we've been doing concrete work because it's the smoothest ride that we can get. Basically the split is a 65% city share, 35% Union Pacific Railroad. So the estimated city share would be $84,969. That estimate's actually done by the UP. Historically, they've been pretty close on those. There's been a few that have been less and a few that have been more, but that's a fair number for budgeting purposes. The actual costs do vary once the exact expenses are incurred, and depending on how long they take and how much work is involved when they get there. But 2013 budget has $50,000 in gas tax and $50,000 in sales tax. So for 2 crossings, in this case, we're doing 1 big crossing. Basically, we have our strategic plan. We're supposed to put as much of our resources as possible to maintaining the infrastructure. So this is part of that approach, and we would, I guess, recommend approving this agreement to get this work completed in the next year or so. I didn't ask for questions.
Any questions for staff?
The 65% for the city share, is that pretty standard across the system?
It is. They're on the non-mainline pieces of track at 65-35. On the main line, which would be Santa Fe, the mainline UP, and that's 50-50. So I'm not sure why that's the case, but that's a 50-50 split. So that one, I don't know if it'll be more or less, but it's 4 tracks. It'll be a lot bigger project, but it won't be as high of a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, interestingly enough, a lot of the folks in the public will wonder why the railroad doesn't pay 100% of that type of
Correct.
cost.
Right.
And
That would be best.
Yeah,
that's
50-50,
it's a very
you know.
good question, and we had some correspondence we're going to return a response to regarding that. But unless it's changed, and I'll look at these guys that nod their heads if I'm wrong, but statutorily, the railroad's obligation is just to provide us with wooden railroad crossings, the minimum standard that are properly maintained. And so anytime an entity, city or county, whomever it might be, would like to have whether it be rubber or concrete, whatever that higher standard is,
You're right.
then the burden of cost really begins to fall. And then at that point, the railroad doesn't have any obligation. And that's really, you're really subject to their negotiation at that point in time. And it's just a decision as to how bad you want the smoother crossing that functions better. And then Salina, of course, for years we've gone with the concrete crossings. And for the most part, they've done pretty well. I mean, we've talked about, know that 9th and Santa Fe are difficult because there's so many of them in different elevations and they're so close together, so it's always tricky to keep those smooth, but they work pretty well in most locations.
What are the what are the traffic impacts?
This is a wide enough crossing where we believe we'd have to do half at a time. The State Street, South Street, the most recent ones, and Walnut, we did those 3 in the last few years, and they're as close as those tracks are, or crossings are to each other, we're able to just close the road and get it done. So that it's helpful when we can do that. I guess we would probably try to get them to do half at a time, and that'll be a negotiation with them, I guess, at the time, but that's closing down iron would be a real bear for very long, so we'll just have to work with them the best we can.
Dan, are there any planned crossing maintenance activities associated with the Belmont and Magnolia intersection?
No, I just emailed you on that, but it's a fair crossing, and we have done, or the UP did a panel replacement a few years ago. But the hope, and we should have pretty good success with the ride quality at Belmont and Magnolia. The ride coming up to the intersection, or the tracks, was pretty bad before, so we'll notice a major increase.
That transition should be better.
Yeah,
then?
the transition should be much better. Now, granted, those are panel crossings that are getting up there in life, but they're not urgent need of repair yet, we don't believe.
Okay. Any more staff questions? Anyone from the public? Surprising. Yeah, we're getting out of here too early. I don't know what's going on. We got one more item on the agenda, and it's not 10 o'clock. I don't know.
That's right.
I was looking forward to pizza tonight. I'd entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 13-7038, authorizing the mayor to sign into the agreement with UPRR to perform the at-grade public road crossing improvements on Iron Street.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 13-7038, authorizing an agreement with Union Pacific Railroad to perform at-grade public road crossing improvements on East Iron Street project number 13-2999. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 4-0, and that moves us on to 8-4.
Item 8.4, discussions on C4 zoning district permitted and conditional uses.
This is Mr. Gage.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, I'll take this, and then we have Mr. Andrew in case there are questions I can't answer. But I think it was about 3 weeks ago, you had a zoning decision, or a text amendment, not a zoning decision, but a text amendment to the zoning code to add dog kennels to the C4 downtown zoning district. And at that time, the commission chose not to do that. And after that, staff was contacted both by SDI officials and others about their prior recommendation in 2008, and also the need for the text amendment. So I took a look at it, Dean also took a look at it, and what we found is they were correct in their questioning. What we found is there was a mistake made in 2008 in that the dog kennels should have actually already been a conditional use in the C4 zoning code. The basic story is prior to 2008, dog kennels were permitted use in the C4 zoning, which is, to me, is a little odd, but and the staff it was too. Staff had recommended that that use be eliminated. The Lee District Board of Advisors agreed with taking it from the permitted use list, but said we'd like to have it in the conditional use list. And it was brought to the City Commission. On first reading, the commissioners approved that, and in that the ordinance form showed a markup version, things that were struck out, moved around, that type of thing, so everyone would understand what the changes were. And there was not a lot of attention on that use. Most of the attention was on tattoo parlors and massage parlors, things like that. And so I think
which are down there.
Yeah. So this one kind of fell between the cracks. And on second reading, the final version was the cleaned up version of the ordinance, and just quite honestly, accidentally, the dog kennels were omitted as either a permitted or a conditional use, so they weren't on there. No one recognized that. The commissioners approved that ordinance as it was provided to you on second reading, and that's how it was published. Therefore, what in essence happened was a complete deletion of that use altogether. Mm-hmm. And so that's what then prompted, 5 years, fast forward to not long ago, the need to actually add it back in. So given that, and again, we always try to tell you if we make a mistake, it doesn't matter how far back, we'll try to bring it back to you. And our purpose today is both to disclose that and provide you with that context so you understand it. And then also you have the opportunity, if you want to reconsider whether you'd like to put that use back in the C4 as a conditional use. With that kind of logistically, this wouldn't fall under your reconsideration or like the Roberts Rules approach, because that actually has to occur the meeting of or the following meeting. And so if you would decide to say, yeah, we can see it being put in as a conditional use, staff would like to do that, you would need to, by a majority vote, to ask us to add that to a future agenda. Could be a week, whatever works on your calendar, and staff could then bring that formal action back to you, that text amendment action, and that's how it would be handled. But we felt it was worth bringing back to you, and we know there are quite a few, I'm surprised there are a few more people in the room, because there's been a lot of correspondence on that based on what prompted that request for you, so we wanted to bring that to you. Be happy to answer any questions if we can.
Any questions?
The formal action then would be, do we need, it was left off, you had a first reading where it was present, you had a second reading where it was not
correct,
consistent. Would we just need to redo the second reading?
No, the second reading, I don't believe so. I believe the second reading established it was going to be deleted by your action. I believe you would need to bring that back as the first and second reading. I'll defer to Mr. Binkson to make sure I'm correct with that.
Mr. Gage is correct. It would take amending the ordinance in order to conform to that original intent.
Now,
it's a function of the fact that the ordinance was, the published version is the key version, and the published version did not include it. That's what was approved on second reading and published. So that's what prompted, and the question was directed our way as to the status, and just felt like that with those two actions having been taken on second reading and publication, it was difficult to reverse that action in any way unless except by action of the commission. So it would take an ordinance first and second reading to make the change or correction, depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm. Now, from a timing perspective, if you felt, and I don't know how pressing the timing is based on what would have been a request for a conditional use permit. That may be something that someone else in the audience might be able to address. But if you felt that you'd like to handle it quickly, we could bring it back to you. You could look at it as, I can't remember a phrase, it used to be an emergency second reading, but we could bring it back to you, and you could handle both first and second reading in the same meeting if you felt the need to do so. So we can handle that if we needed to. And if not, it would be first reading, and then the following week, second reading, and then publication.
Well, I'm supportive of bringing it back, and depending on if there's a pending conditional use, I know that was kind of what kind of kicked this whole thing off, was that it was not a permitted use. They were wanting to get that. This was the first step. Where I am on this is that, we had a long discussion about this, and I hold to still that I don't completely agree with the use. However, I do believe that this is a situation where, had it not been for leaving it off the second reading, this would have never come before us. And it's certainly not an issue that I would have initiated, and therefore I'm completely supportive of this coming back in, putting it a conditional use, have it go through the process that it probably should have originally. The benefit, I think, is that we got a lot of, I think there was a lot of discussion and probably a lot of feedback as to what some of the major concerns might be. And so I think that not just from the Soggy Dog applicant, but that anyone going forward probably is, I think that there probably is going to be a somewhat high bar to get over to really see this as an appropriate use in the downtown C4. So I'm supportive of bringing it back and
I
taking
think
that
too,
proper look
if
at
it helps any, when you talk about what could happen, I didn't realize even until I went back through the documents and read it more closely that prior to 2008 it was actually permitted use, and you didn't see these uses just popping up all over downtown. So one thing is I don't think it's a use that will be in essence applied very often. And secondly, certainly the City Commission and Planning Commission have some kind of different perspectives maybe at this point on some of the broader planning and development issues, and that can happen. But with regards to conditional uses, the Planning Commission has a record of really looking at those very closely and applying those conditions. They have staff support and legal support too, so they can handle that just as easily as they can any conditional use. So from a staff perspective, I don't have any concerns whatsoever in that being administered in the downtown. I believe if it's going to be allowed, a conditional use is most appropriate.
Well, I didn't have any problem with it to start with, so
You're a
okay
people
with me.
pleaser.
And my only concern is for the silent majority, the dogs. I wanted to make sure that the dogs were cared for and exercised especially.
hopefully they'll be the silent majority.
I just wanted to clarify that small animal hospitals also fell within that category. Small animal hospitals and dog kennels were both in the conditional use category on first reading and fell out on second reading, so those were the two that were unintentionally omitted.
That was the only two. There was nothing
Those
else.
are the only two.
Okay. Yeah, I would tend to agree too. I tried to do my research and see other towns our size that had dog kennels downtown, and I just didn't see them. People kept saying New York or Los Angeles or all these things. Well, those towns are 150 miles long, so naturally people aren't going to drive 100 miles to board their dog. But in trying to find much stuff around cities our size, I didn't see a lot. But if it was intentionally left off, I think we need to bring it back and put it back on there. And if, again, like you said, the Planning Commission has the diligence to look it over, and I don't even think it would have come before us had it been on that initial list, would it? I don't
No,
think we'd ever
if-
even seen it, so it would have been...
Correct. If we hadn't had the omission, what would have happened is a conditional use permit request would have gone to the Planning Commission. They would have looked at it, determined what conditions to place on it, either approved it with those or rejected it, and just dealt with the request.
Sure. Yeah, just we could have been done and been the nice guys, and no one would have known the difference. Public comment? Yeah.
Hi, Judy Larson, 715 North 9th. I just need some clarification. I was at the meeting we're in. I feel you guys totally messed up and denied the Soggy Dog
I
for
thought we
variance.
did too.
Thank you. My question...
They did.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. My question is, my coming here to this meeting was my first exposure to her business and everything just seemed so perfect, the way she was doing things. So I need a clarification on this conditional use. Doesn't that give you the option of approving the Soggy Dog, but then denying the next person that might come that doesn't measure up?
There's some truth to that, but we should probably let Greg give you some some lessons in lawsuits, and if you decide you're going to tell the next person no, kind of how far that goes. It's not as easy as one would think, I would gather, that we tell one person yes, and the next person go, well, it's kind of, we might find
I
ourselves...
have a degree from Rutgers in pre-law.
Yeah, so there you go. So
Yeah.
you probably have a clue that we'd probably end up in a bit. And that's really where we came from. All of us, I think, felt comfortable with the applicant. I think we all agreed that she probably, if anybody could do it, it was probably her.
So you probably would not have the option unless you wrote it in somewhere that you did have the option and made it part of the ordinance?
Yeah, the short, that's a
Right.
great question. The short story is that it's possible that multiple people could request for different locations to have that use, or have a conditional use permit. And if the circumstances of those requests are all pretty much the same, the response and whatever conditions would be placed should be pretty consistent. If there's a difference in those circumstances, then the Planning Commission has that discretion to apply possibly different conditions. We have different conditional uses, so
Right.
it just depends. So they have discretion, but they have to try to avoid being arbitrary and capricious.
Yes. All right, thank you, guys.
Sure.
Yeah, one thing too that I think we don't want to lose sight of here is that what we were hearing was not a specific conditional use application. It was a land use issue versus a site specific. So, I think it's also noteworthy to be cautious about, and I've tried not to refer to the specific applicant because it would be a foregone conclusion that they would receive approval. So
That's absolutely correct, and that's a part of it that the general public doesn't always understand. Is the first step, if it's not included as on the conditional use list or permitted use list, the first step is to enable that use by the type of action that was brought before you. And then once it's added to the list, if it's a conditional use, then they can ask to have that specific conditional use at a location and allow that to be reviewed and acted upon. But you're absolutely right. The stage at this point is to simply enable the opportunity to even consider that. And so again, if that's something, it sounds like you may have consensus, if that's something you'd like to do, a motion to ask staff to add that item on your agenda for whichever meeting date you would like would be sufficient.
Yeah, I think we could probably.
Sure.
I mean, that's something that I assume we could have ready by our next meeting, don't you think? I mean, I can't imagine why it would.
I think so, and it does prompt one question to Greg. And I know before there was some discussion as to whether there should be kind of preconditions that would be applied across the board, possibly geographic limitations or things like that. And there's a couple ways to look at that. We could try to come up with those, or we could not include those. And if we don't, certainly with staff support and having legal counsel review any conditional use requests, we would need to properly guide the Planning Commission if there's a legal aspect that they need to be aware of. And that would be on us to do that.
The applicant, at my request, submitted a list of preconditions that she felt would be beneficial for that type of business. I could forward those to.
Yeah, we could look at
City
that.
Attorney.
I'm not aware of any other conditional uses that we have preconditions, do we? I'd have to go back and look, but I don't remember seeing any.
You have to look to Mr. Andrew. I don't recall any offhand either.
But we'll take a look at that, and if there are some that'll...
We have some that, in the case of drinking establishments, the Planning Commission, by policy, established certain criteria that they were going to apply to drinking establishments that they wouldn't apply to other conditional uses, such as proximity to lofts, proximity to churches and schools, things like that. They were, I would call them, over and above criteria that were specific to drinking establishments, and that has been done for tattoo parlors and for others, but the Planning Commission adopted that as additional criteria for consideration on a conditional use case.
So, Dean, when they adopted for their own guideline?
Yes, their Planning
Okay.
Commission policy guidelines or guidelines for reviewing drinking establishment requests in the downtown area. So they have the standard conditional use factors, but then they have over and above factors that they consider in the case of a drinking establishment.
So you wouldn't
Well-
see what they did in the ordinance, but they would be guidelines they would use when they review those that they've established for that purpose. And that's something we could do as well.
And as far as the geographic considerations, I do think, Mr. Bankston's illustration of the iron in Santa Fe was a pretty good example to give, and I know that there was a motion made earlier about, or in that process, a motion that was made about some geographic guidelines as being on the perimeter of the...
I think that was, I was trying to get the geographic Ash and 7th and,
Right.
kind of on the outer edge of the...
I'd be happy with the staff recommendation if they have any,
Okay.
or lack of.
And if we
or-
have to, if we get caught up in that some, we can always bring it back if you
Yeah.
give us further direction later. So,
Okay.
so in that case, then for today, I think all we need is that motion to bring it back for whichever meeting date you'd like to see it brought to you.
Would September 23rd be too early, or I think our next one is October 6th.
Next
I
meeting.
The
I
mayor
need to.
won't be here
I
that
can't
day. I don't know
recall
if
the league
that
conference date.
would matter.
Luann, do you recall the league conference date? I just want to be sure we don't get on it. Stomp
October
on it.
14th.
14th. Okay. October.
So the 23rd.
September 23rd. And would we need to, we would need to declare now if we would want to do a first and second reading? I mean, I wouldn't
Just
want
need
to
to
hold them up anymore.
Tell us if that's what you want. You don't even have to put that in your motion. Just tell us, and we'll prepare it that way,
Okay.
and then you can
I
vote
would
on
say,
it.
I would say intend for that, yeah, just so we could move it along forward.
Okay.
Then I'd make a motion that we direct staff to reconstitute the ordinance allowing the conditional use of dog kennels in the C4 and place that on the September 23rd agenda.
Dog kennels, let me just be clear, dog kennels and small animal hospital, or what was the other one?
Is there,
Both of those were inadvertently omitted, so if we're going to correct it, it would have to be both of those.
I'll second it, and then I'd ask that maybe we could, is there something we can call that besides dog kennels? That's really not what,
I think
Well, the next one may be.
that was the
I'd
Dean,
like
I
to-
believe
Well,
that was
the
the
next
official
one-
phrase,
Yeah, I think we
wasn't it?
better keep it to that.
That is what we have defined in our ordinance.
Yeah, we better not try and rewrite the whole rule book here. Yeah. It was that my understanding that you wanted the two left off, the small animal.
No, that I wanted I wanted what was left off included in the new,
Okay. So
Okay,
motion would
that's
include
right.
dog kennels and small
you had
animal
that as a
hospitals.
second?
but
yeah,
I
I
saw
seconded it. I seconded
Mr.
it.
Bankston had something.
Well,
that-
yeah, sorry. Quick point, if I may, that I hope is consistent with your motion, and it's actually a point raised by Mr. Scragg. We do have the aspect of whether this is full process text amendment or whether this is viewed from your standpoint as a corrective measure. As a corrective measure, then I think we're correct in simply bringing it back to you so that you can act consistently with the previous recommendation of the Planning Commission, as opposed to a newly initiated action, which would arguably trigger the full process back through the current Planning Commission. So if characterizing it as a corrective action is consistent with your thinking, that would address that as well.
That is consistent with the motion.
Yeah, that seems the most logical. Is that the way you understood it?
I seconded it.
And let me just kind of think about what the wording here is. Maybe I better have the clerk give me, or should I just, let me just, let me just.
Let her restate the motion.
Yeah.
I stated it.
To direct staff to place on the September 23rd agenda an ordinance that would allow dog kennels and small animal hospitals as a conditional use, and this is based on a corrective action.
Okay. With the clerk's motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 4-0. Any other business, anyone?
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.